Welcome to today's HLAA Employment Task Force webinar on thriving in sound-intensive workplaces, strategies for inclusion, communication, and success. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Cruz, and I'll be your host today. Before I turn our webinar over to our amazing panelist and moderator, I'm going to go over some really quick housekeeping tips. The webinar will be captioned, and to see captions on this webinar, you'll need to click on the CC icon and click Show Subtitles. You can change the font size in the subtitle setting. And the chat feature will only be for the panelists today. We'd like participants to please use the Q&A icon to ask questions. We'll be using this to facilitate questions and answers after the presentation. If you've joined by computer, the presentation should be in side-by-side mode. The slides are on the left and the panelists are on the right in gallery view. To change the size of your side-by-side view, you do that by hovering between the two screens and moving the gray bar to adjust to your desired size. If you join by mobile device or phone or iPad, your view may be slightly different and you may have to scroll between views to get to the desired one. And just a quick disclaimer that HLAA does not endorse any product featured in this webinar. HLAA is providing an educational opportunity to learn about new products and opportunities and how they could benefit people with hearing loss. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to our HLAA Employment Task Force Chair, Michael Noble.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. And thank you so much, Melissa, for a great introduction. And also a special thank you to our captioner, Lisa. So I'm Michael Noble. I am currently the VP of Global Marketing at a Swedish-based medical device company called Zinzyme. Just real quickly about me, I was born profoundly deaf, received a cochlear implant at the age of 2. And so this task force is really near and dear to my heart, especially to be serving in this role as the chair for the Task Force for Accessible Inclusive Employment. And of course, none of this could be possible without this incredible team. So just want to recognize all of these people that make up the task force that you see right in front of you. And our goal is really to help people with hearing loss, like all of us, their employers, and really any of their allies toward accessible and inclusive workplaces and employment opportunities. So we really want to help work towards increased career satisfaction and success for all involved. Now, please feel free to reach out to any of us on the task force if we can be of any help or be a resource. And of course, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. And I have my email address there at the bottom. So if we go to the next slide. Oh, looks like we went a little hard. There we go. So today, I'm super excited to have this particular topic because we've talked a lot about things like cybersecurity, navigating, getting the assistive technologies. We've talked about working in virtual meetings, in-person meetings, all of those things. And now we're taking it a step farther to say, well, what about those really sound-intensive workplaces like manufacturing plants, retail stores, working in the restaurant industry, all of those different things. And we know these can be challenging for those even without hearing loss, but also for those with hearing loss. And so I'm super excited that we have put together this incredible panel of speakers, all coming from diverse backgrounds that can offer unique perspectives. And those combined perspectives are really designed to help you succeed in your respective roles or really any noisy environment that you might have to navigate with your hearing loss. So first we have Kendra Hada. She is a bartender, mixologist, and a brand ambassador. Really remarkable individual. So we're glad to have you, Kendra. Thanks. Next, we have Dr. Renee Horton. She is an international speaker. She also has worked with NASA and does really incredible things. And she has been one of our previous webinar speakers. So Dr. Horton, we're really excited to welcome you back for this webinar. And then next we have Greg. Greg Bodden was or is the fire department emergency manager and has also been in a variety of different roles. Really remarkable individual. So I'm really glad to have him on here. And then last but certainly not least, we have one of our also task force members coming back to be in this wonderful webinar, David DeBellis. He is an engineer with Hewlett Packard and has navigated both the typical quieter office setting all the way to those noisy environments around loud machinery. So as Melissa mentioned throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to put that into the chat box. We will have the last 15 minutes all focused on answering your great questions, and we will start with the questions that we received through the registration. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Are you guys ready? All right, awesome. So for this one, let's just kind of level set and get a taste of the types of environments that you work in. So I'm going to serve this first question to you, Kendra. So to kind of ground us, can you briefly describe your work environment and what makes communication particularly challenging in your setting?
Yeah, so I work in bars and restaurants. Right now, predominantly a bar, and it's um not don't think club. I mean, I definitely specialize more in, the craft cocktail, but it's loud. It's people drinking, having a good time. It's a lot of voices all overlapping on top of each other. You have your ambience, the background noise. So, working in my environment, it's really loud and it has its challenges, but it's also something that is doable and manageable. I think through the years I'm more open about having hearing loss, and I think it's more so just like handling misconceptions. Like there's a lot of times I show up for work and I actually will not wear my hearing aids, and I think what people need to understand is like hearing aids, they just amplify everything. So it's kind of one of those things where like depending on the architecture of the space of the restaurant or the bar, the echoes and the vibration and reverb can get so loud and so intense that it's this question for you of like, you know I hear everything, but I understand less versus I understand but hear less. And so in my environment, communication is everything. I'm dealing with guests. It's hospitality. It's having that experience of making them feel heard and welcomed and like, what can I get for you? Um, so the beauty is like, I'm facing people face to face. So sometimes if I take hearing aids out or I change the settings of my hearing aids so it filters out certain things, maybe the world's a little more quiet for me and I am extremely hearing impaired, but you get more of that one-on-one kind of experience, and I can understand what people are saying. So I think that's what it really looks like is I think sometimes people will think like, oh, you're not that hearing impaired. And it's like, no, no, I am. It's just like, I'm reading your lips, I'm taking all of your cues, and I hope that makes sense. So it's definitely something that's doable. It's just loud. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Kendra, the audience is really curious if you could describe the type of hearing loss that you have and the degree of your hearing loss, if you don't mind sharing.
No, I'm happy to share. So, born this way. For me, it's so in terms of hertz and decibels, so everything is muffled for me. Everything. But in terms of hertz, I have a little bit of access to like certain midtones. I mean, they're kind of muffled, so sometimes it sounds a bit like being underwater, but I do have access to midtones, which I think helps a lot with my speech recognition. Past a certain hertz, I cannot hear treble, but I also cannot hear bass. So, translating into language, the way my audiologist described to me is I only hear about a third of what anybody says to me ever. I have a lot of struggle with like power vowels. So like a vowel following a consonant. It's something about how it comes out or like the base of it. So yeah, I hear like a third of anything.
Yeah.
But I was born this way and I did not get hearing aids until later in life. Not because I didn't need them. There's so many things. It's hearing is funny. I was always in, advanced classes in school, and it's kind of, if I could do my work, if I manage to communicate, I think it's hard for anybody to experience what's going on in your head. And then there's also the financial costs of hearing aids, which is like a whole other topic. Um, so yeah, I didn't get hearing aids until later in life, and the brain is amazing. So I think being forced to just kind of figure it out. Um, I have really, really good speech recognition, and I can have conversations without skipping a beat. But that doesn't mean that I'm actually hearing anything. I'm just kind of working overtime in my brain.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Kendra. Yeah, and it's amazing how much the brain is doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to hearing loss.
Yeah.
Doctor, yeah, so Dr. Horton, I would love to also ask you the same question, but can you also maybe describe your hearing loss, if you're comfortable sharing, and then kind of describe the work environment in which you operate? Oh, you're on mute.
I was saying I'm glad I don't operate anything, but I have a moderate hearing loss, and mine is in the speech range. And so when they originally referred to my hearing loss, it was a cookie cutter bite. So I could hear some highs and lows, but like right smack in speech range is what I could not hear or understand. And then I am late stage deaf. I was diagnosed at 17 during a physical for the Air Force ROTC, and then went on and went to college, and then did not go into hearing aids until 10 years later. So started wearing them at 27, and then have been in them now right at 27, 28 years. I currently work for NASA, and I am a chief engineer on two smaller projects with airplanes. But I spent 12 years on the space side in the manufacturing plant for Artemis. And it's a very hard environment to work. A lot of times we're making calls on what we call on the floor, which is in the factory with all the noises that are happening, whether it's machining, whether it's things driving in there, the forklifts moving about, the cranes overhead, people yelling at people, the drilling. It was just a lot. It's a lot of noise coming from a lot of different directions. And because a warehouse is kind of a big open space, noise travels. It's not running into other poles and pillars and things like that. It's literally that sound wave is just traveling. And so, even being in those environments with hearing aids, I can kind of think like what Kendra has said, being in that environment, you're still picking up everything. And so, what I ended up doing was leaning very heavily on technology in there. Um, Up front, I am letting people know I am hearing impaired. You need to face me. At one point, there was even my safety vest had it on the safety vest. So if someone's approaching me from behind in the factory, they knew that I would not always hear what was being said from behind. And so they knew to tap me on the shoulder, move in front of me, those kind of things. I spent a lot of time just advocating for what my needs were, simply because most people hadn't encountered someone in our environment. And so, or someone who was more open about it, like, this is what I am, this is how we need to communicate, for me to be able to be successful for the program. I also defer to it's not just about my success, it's about the success overall, or trying to reach an overall goal. And to be able to do that, all team members need to be able to have a valuable input. And so I usually kind of stand behind that versus making it just about me, because I don't know who else is not speaking up. The environment is, I'm exhausted mentally at the end of the day, though. So to be in the factory, if I'm on the factory floor and I'm having to actively listen, people go, "What do you mean actively listen?" And I'm talking about I've got to listen to make sure I heard what you heard, and then my brain processes it. And then when I run it back in my brain, sometimes it's like, that doesn't make sense. I didn't hear something correctly, right? Then I've got to go back. And so just being in that environment and working at toward the end of the day, just the exhaustion that's at the end of the day. But like I said, I lean heavily on the technology. I'm really grateful for a lot of the programs now that pick up voices, put it on the screen with your device that you're using. So to still be in those, and then now on the airplane side, you can walk out on, there are earmuffs, there are all kinds of other technologies that work with the hearing aids, so that I'm not in danger. I'm more concerned about my safety, and then the safety of others. I usually tag team in those environments to where somebody is always with me, to make sure that if it doesn't look like I'm actually responding to what could be an emergency, then they provide that cover and then make sure and move me out as well.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Horton, for sharing that. What an inspiring journey you've been on. It's really interesting. Both you, Kendra, and Dr. Horton have very different work environments, but I think the communication risk and the stakes are the same.
Yeah.
They exist, when you have the hearing loss and you really have to speak up and advocate. And I love your point, Dr. Horton, on this is not just about you at the individual level. This is a team situation, and everyone needs to be supporting one another for the success of the team. So I really like that soundbite. Okay, well, let's move right into segment two here, which is a little bit about, the tactics and the technology and maybe strategies that you might use. Because I'm seeing a lot of really good questions on, are you using assistive technologies, mini mics, things of that nature? So let's talk a little bit more practically. What strategies, accommodations, or technologies have made the biggest difference for you in the sound intensive workplaces? So I'm going to ask Greg for you to respond first. And if you don't mind, maybe sharing a little bit about your hearing loss background as well, and then you can answer the question. So Greg, floor is yours.
Sure.
Oh, Greg,
double tap should be on
there
now.
you go.
Severe to profound hearing loss, one hearing aid, one cochlear implant. Often my workplace is an emergency operations center, or whether for a real disaster or incident, or perhaps just for training. But imagine a large room, lots of simultaneous conversations, phone calls, and then broadcast over the top of it is a cacophony of public safety radio broadcasting. And I've learned that nobody hears well in this environment, but no one's responsible enough to fix it. So one of the tips that I learned as a firefighter and instructor was we call the loop. And so you're on a fire ground, it's a noisy environment, there's trucks operating, there's the sound of all the equipment and fans. And if I'm in charge, I would say to a subordinate, for example, engine 66, I need you to go to the third floor to do a primary search. And they would loop it back and say, copy, third floor, primary search. So the loop or the handshake, I know they understood their assignment. So in my current work at a fire department, I might be talking to my supervisor and might say, okay, I want to make sure I heard this right. You're authorizing 6 firefighters on overtime for this storm event. And loop it back. Yep, 6 firefighters on overtime. And here's a tip. This works at home too. So honey, what time are we going to see your parents? We're leaving at 10. Copy, we're leaving at 10. So husbands, that's a tip. Try it. You look like a rock star. So I've had good luck with this. It's a regular practice on the fire ground, and it applies, I think, in many noisy environments.
Excellent, Greg. And I love the redundancy, and I use that a lot at work even. And I'll just say, I'm going to repeat back what I think I heard just to make sure I heard it correctly. And people love that. So I definitely want to back you up on that. Great, great advice. David, I would love to ask you the same question, but can you tell us a little bit about your hearing loss and what you use and then answer the question?
Yeah, so my hearing loss was sudden and profound at age 55. And so I regained the ability to hear via a cochlear implant. And so for me, it was, pretty much, learning once again how to operate in the real world. And just to explain what my real world is like, it's a classic engineering environment. You're in cubes and you're in meetings and stuff like that. But our business is in industrial printing devices, which are very large and very loud devices that are installed all over the world. And so a lot of the job is going out to these customer sites and helping them either fix it or run it properly. I think kind of building on Greg's looping, that's very important to make sure that communication is actually established. And actually, to add to that, since a lot of it is at distance, we've supplemented it with hand signals. And these are just very simple hand signals that, like when I go to a customer site and I'm meeting with new operations personnel, right up front, I can tell them about my hearing loss and also introduce these hand signals, which is like very simple, like thumbs up, I understood what you were saying. You know, this is like, no, I did not understand what you're saying. And, this is like, hey, we need to get close to each other to have some sort of consult, perhaps even out of earshot of this very loud device. Um, as far as the in-person meetings, I think you have to realize that, in-person meetings are kind of a sound intensive environment. And so what I've had to do is just be comfortable with telling people about my situation. And if, just tell them if one person's talking, it's pretty much fine, particularly if I can locate close to them. But if there are multiple people talking at once, that's a problem. And I've found that if you let people know that in a tactful manner, they're usually very good at accommodating you. And for the situations where I'm running the meeting, what I tend to like to do is just say, "Hey, let's have a Zoom or a Teams meeting." Even if people are in the same building, we do that. And that I find that Zoom or Teams really does uh, make a more favorable environment for me to understand what's going on.
Got to push that unmute button. Thank you. Well said, David. And thank you for sharing. Yeah, you've got a quite a unique, dynamic, transitional, quieter environments to really loud machinery. So that's quite the transition. Yeah, I just want to kind of sum up some of the things I heard. Definitely making sure you advocate for yourself using visual cues. Renee kind of talked about this, Dr. Horton and Greg, and both David, you also mentioned kind of using signals, making sure people face you or tap your shoulder to make sure they have your attention first. Don't try to yell your name from behind. You're probably not going to hear it. And the other thing I wanted to kind of share and want to just disclaim that HLA does not endorse one product or the other. So we do talk a little bit about some of the different options, and lots of hearing aid manufacturers and cochlear implant manufacturers have all different products. But one thing that I absolutely love is this mini mic plus that I have, and I use this religiously with my cochlear implant. In fact, I'm using it right now to stream audio. I have a second one connected to my laptop. And I also like to use it for noisy environments. Like if you're driving in a car, for example, you can clip it to the passenger and it's like someone's talking straight into your ear. I know there's Phonak, also lots of really good options for like the Roger pen that you can kind of use like a mini mic. And you know what's also remarkable is your smartphone nowadays is amazing. It can have kind of a sort of like a remote mic, also captioning. I like to use the Otter AI app that helps to caption and transcribe meetings or conversations in those noisy environments. So there's a lot of tools. And I'm going to do a quick shameless plug before I move to the next segment. We are going to have, hosted by the task force, an in-person session at the HLA Convention 2026 in Louisville, Kentucky in June. And we're going to go even more into detail and show you physically the different types of technologies out there to help you in these different environments that we talked about today. So make sure you mark your calendars. If you haven't registered, go online and register for that. Okay, moving right along here to the third segment here, which is really all about self-advocacy, disclosure, and getting the accommodations that you need. So I'm going to ask David to answer this question first. So many people struggle with the when or whether they should even disclose their hearing loss at work. How did you navigate that decision, David?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a person that likes to talk about themselves, and I'm not comfortable kind of asking for special treatment. But I think I learned the hard way early on that faking it until you make it just doesn't work. And you really do need to be as honest and forthcoming as possible up front, even if it's uncomfortable and maybe even counterproductive at first. Um, I think for me, it was a little difficult at 55, kind of admitting that I was, hearing impaired because it kind of has that, stigma of being old around it. And I had to get past that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think being upfront, and of course, that's a function of just what your special situation is. I was fortunate at HP that it's a company that values the principles of DEI, even though they don't call it that. And hearing impairment is clearly kind of a function of that. It does make it important for you to be included in particular ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. And Kendra, I would love to ask you the same question, especially in your line of work.
Yeah, I think for me it is a little different just because the nature of my work is so different. You know, I'm very, very selective on when I disclose and when I don't. I think I've become more open about it, but there's a lot of times where if I apply for a job, like honestly, I won't mention it at all until like after I'm like, great, I'm hired. And a lot of that has to do with multiple reasons. I mean, one, as I said earlier, in my field, I have the luxury of like my job is very face to face. And as everyone else said, that's such a huge thing. Like if you're gonna say something to me, please just face me. I can't really catch it even with hearing aids when it's behind me, or sometimes I'll hear it, but it's not like language. Like I have to, it's that active listening thing, and it helps to have the whole picture. And so because my job is face to face, like it's so much easier for me, even with a disability. I'm just as capable as anyone else. Um, and then sometimes I won't always disclose because again, like I love my hearing aids. I wear them all the time. I truly do. It's just at work sometimes like the reverb, it gets so overstimulating. It gets so loud that like truly, and it is sometimes easier to take them out, and then to just use, whatever active listening, whatever skills I've learned in life to know what someone's saying to me, know what they're asking, make the correct order. And sometimes it's difficult, and I'll face certain questions or certain suspicions where people are like, "Oh, well, your hearing's not that bad," because I'm not wearing my hearing aids, and it's like, no, I'm just doing what works for me in this particular environment. So some, and there's also a little bit of the I can't tell you how many times I'll say to somebody, I'm like, "I'm so sorry, like, do you mind speaking up? Like, I'm hearing impaired," and they're like, "Yeah, it's kind of loud in here," and I'm like. No, or like, "Oh no, I'm like hard of hearing too," or "Sorry, I mumble." And I get it, because people, they're just out, they're dining, they're having a good time, but I think people just don't always take it seriously. And so I've just kind of learned when to say and when to not, when to just be like, "You're drinking alcohol, it's fine." I'm what can I get for you? So yeah, I am more vocal about it though, because it's important, and I'm fortunate and really lucky, particularly where I work now, and that my coworkers, it's you know I did tell them after the fact of after being hired, and kind of like proved myself in my first shift. But then afterwards, and I think because my coworkers like know me and they're like my family, hospitality is really lovely, this industry. Like it's the job of taking care of people, so we're such social people that they know if I need something, I will speak up. Otherwise, treat me like anybody else. Like, I put me whatever station you need, give me whatever task, I'm going to accomplish it. um and if I'm struggling, or if I have an off day, or if I'm just mentally tired, like, they know, and they're like, "Okay, she's fine," and they respect that, or give me whatever tools I need. So that's for me. I advocate after I get the job.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kendra, and thank you, David. Yeah, and I think the take-home message is you have to do what is best for you. That's the most important thing. And now, as you guys heard earlier, I was born profoundly deaf and I got the cochlear implant at the age of 2. So the hearing loss has been part of my life since day one. And now that I'm in this executive role that I have, I manage people and manage a team and a group. And I have to say, I think it's really important and I value people who speak up. I don't see that as a weakness at all. In fact, I see that as a strength. But the important thing is you have to create a culture to make it feel safe for those to be able to speak up. And one example that I always like to share where you can take, some of the what may feel like a weakness into a strength. I love having captions on Teams meetings. I mean, we are on Teams meetings hours every single day. And other people appreciate it, especially with the age of AI, because if you have captioning, well, other people might benefit from it if English is not their first language, and you can use AI to sum up the notes at the end. And same thing happens when you're right there in the loud environment. Like if you're in a loud restaurant, people could probably benefit from the speaker having a microphone, especially if they're doing a formal presentation. So asking for, hey, is there a speaker with a handheld mic we can use? Can we use visuals? Those types of things, because it may not just benefit you, it could benefit the whole team. So I just want you to kind of take that. Don't feel like it's all weight on you. It's probably going to help other people that may not have felt like they could speak up. So I just want to kind of leave you that word of encouragement. So thank you again, David and Kendra. Okay, we're going to move right into the last segment before we kind of do a lightning round of bonus questions, and then we'll answer all of the burning questions from the audience. So the last segment here is if you could give 3 pieces of advice to employers or managers who want to make noisy workplaces more inclusive, what would they be? And Dr. Horton, I'm going to start with you first, if you don't mind. So what would be your 3 pieces of advice if you could give? You're on mute.
I would say my 3 pieces of advice would be one for the employer to be willing to listen to the employee about the accommodations that they need. Sometimes one of the things people will worry about is this going to be costly, right? Well, the benefit in the long run is a greater payoff if that employee is fully engaged and can bring their full talents to your team. So listening to the employee in that. Two, it's kind of a trial and error sometimes. So when we talk about the technology, I've got about 5 or 6 different things that I use in different environments. One of them was a Ubi Duo system during COVID, that turned out to be great. I didn't have to be close, but it also really helped, right? And so there are just listening and then understanding that there could be a few things, right? And again, the initial may cost getting them spun up, but these things are long term, and so that they'll work a lot longer, and then your payoff is greater in the end. And then the fourth thing is about maybe actually educating others, right? My job has always been do the education, or when I go on, this camera is new and it keeps moving, so I'm sorry. But it always has been each time I've gone to a new team, I've taken the time to educate our new team. Well, even at one of our facilities, we have a few members that are deaf, and they literally have created courses that said this is how you interact with the deaf and the hard of hearing, and so those kind of things work out really well. It's not the onus of just the employee, though. It is the employer also to make sure that if they're not sure if the employee has spoken up, to go in and ask, do you have everything you need to be successful? Do you have everything you need to be able to compete like everyone else competes? So I think just being open-minded about it may not be solved the first time, and that it could be, it may take 1 or 2 iterations to get exactly what that employee needs. But in the end, again, it's greater in the long run.
Well said. Thank you, Dr. Horton, for sharing that perspective. And next, I would like to ask Greg, would you also mind sharing your 3 pieces of advice?
I had to laugh a little bit because Renee's first one is mine. It was ask, ask what's needed. I served as an elected official for many years, and they were setting up a new meeting space with a expensive assistive listening system. And I kept asking, what are you building? How can I provide input? And they go, oh no, we've got someone who's an expert on this. Well, the first meeting I plugged in my neck loop and I sounded like I was in a metal trash can in a thunderstorm. It was completely unworkable, and it cost them far more money to rebuild it to something usable. So just as she said, ask what works. The others are really simple and so common sense, but I don't know why it doesn't happen more often. Move the conversation away from the noisy thing. And I'm learning that with my hearing aid and my cochlear implant, I'm hearing better in some of these situations than a lot of other people. And I'm often hear from people, thank you for moving away from the machinery, the truck, the fan, the ventilator, that they couldn't hear either. And my last one is facilitate the conversation. If you're the leader of the workshop, the meeting, or whatever, establish some ground rules and say, let's have one conversation. Let's try not to talk over each other. I've worked for a fire department for 30 years. They're all type A and they love shouting each other down. So if we can have one conversation and not talk over, it'll help everybody. So those are my three things.
Awesome. Well said. And thank you so much for sharing that, Greg. Yeah, if I were to just sort of sum up, creating an inclusive workplace is not just about leveling the playing field. It's really about, safety. As Dr. Horton mentioned about, especially in Greg's line of work, is all about the safety. It's also making sure that you can maximize your performance to do the job to the best of your ability. Because when you can also work well, the team also works well. It's all about the team effort. And that's the other piece of advice I would share is if you're advocating for yourself to the employer, tie back to how this is going to improve your performance and also the performance of the overall team and company. So tie it back to what's in it for them as well, because it's got to be a win-win situation. And then, of course, when you have a really good working environment for all involved, it helps with retention because nobody wants to have to rehire all over again just because maybe they didn't have a particular mini mic or couldn't quite hear someone speak in a loud environment. You really want to make sure you create a very inclusive, safe environment for everyone so they can be happy and want to continue to do their best job working with the team. So really well said. I loved everything that I just heard. I feel like I learned a few little tidbits from you all. So thank you for sharing. So before we move into kind of a Q&A, we'd like to do kind of what I'm going to call the lightning round of practical takeaways. So I'm going to ask each of you guys, and if you can just respond in 30 to 45 seconds, what is one tool, habit, or mindset that helped you thrive in a noisy workplace? And David, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think as you heard in the prior talks, it's just advocating for yourself and making people aware of your situation and your needs, as uncomfortable as that may be sometimes.
Well said. Greg?
Use all your tools. So whether it's a pocket talker, a neck loop, a remote mic, whether it's just a strategy of finding out where the speaker is going to be, use all your tools.
Love it. Dr. Wharton?
I'm going to say give yourself some grace. Um, you're going to miss things. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just give yourself some grace and go back at it. Um, everybody else is okay with it sometimes. You just got to, if you set the stage right and you miss it, just give yourself grace.
Well said. Yeah, I think that's so important. Kendra?
I love that. Give yourself grace. Yeah, definitely that. And then I think just, also like have confidence and when you need to like lean on the people around you. And then a good tool is especially if anyone watching is in a field like mine where it is a little different because you kind of have to just the customers right like I'm here for you, what do you need? It is a different work environment, so just use even simple tools like sometimes going like this helps me so much, truly. Little things like this or like little signs like, oh, thank you. I think there's certain things where even if you don't know ASL, like people, general public know what certain things mean. And that helps a lot. But really just like have confidence in yourself, I think, and know that like you're more capable than you think you are. I know it's not necessarily a tool, but it's helped me a lot to just be in environments where I'm like, I can do what everyone else does. I just maybe go about it in a different creative way, but the end result's the same.
Yeah, well said. Well, I loved all of your pieces of advice. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, one thing that has kind of been my life motto, especially as I've grown, is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Sometimes, disclosing or, speaking up and asking for something, I was like, ugh, I don't want to stand out. I'm not comfortable. But you know what? More often than not, it only made me better. And usually there was someone else that ended up helping too. So I definitely want to encourage you to take that bold step, advocate for yourself, speak up, and do what you need. Okay, well, we are now going to officially move into Q&A, and we are getting a ton of great questions. So I'm going to start with maybe one question from the chat box, and then I have summed up over nearly 70 questions that came from the registration. I would love to answer every single one individually. We don't have the time, but we try to bucket them into similar themes. So we're going to ask those 5 questions. So this one question from the Q&A box, really like this question. What do you do when someone says, never mind, when you do not hear them the first or second time, and ask them to please repeat the question or statement? I'm sure we can all relate. I'm seeing a lot of head nods. So who would like to respond to that one first?
Uh, I'll respond. It's so frustrating. It's one of those things where it's like, I understand it's annoying for a person to have to constantly repeat themselves, but it's also like, please have empathy and understand how frustrating it is for like us to constantly feel like left out or like a step behind in a conversation, or like we deal with this constantly. Like you probably don't deal with repeating yourself with everybody. So it's just like, have empathy. If people do that and then they do never mind, like honestly, depending on my relationship with the person and how close I am with them, like I will no shame. I'll call them out. I'll just be like, dude, like who are you talking to? Like, I'm so sorry it's annoying, but like, I really want to have a conversation. I want to connect. Like, can you just speak up? If it's not somebody that I'm close with, I just swallow it and I brush it off, honestly. Because like, what else are you gonna do? There's other things to like stress and worry about. But like, no, I will call people out if I have a close enough relationship with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important to self-advocate. And also sometimes if it's a more professional work environment, I've had that happen and just say, I really want to hear what you have to say, and it's important to me. Can you please repeat it? And sometimes, if you heard more often than not, I'll hear maybe like 3 or 4 words and the rest I couldn't make out. So I'll repeat back what I heard and say, did I hear that? Or I only heard this and this. Could you fill in the blanks for me? And
Yeah,
sometimes that will help too, just to kind of show you're also trying to meet halfway and they need to meet you halfway as well.
yeah,
So, yeah,
that too.
awesome. Yeah, very well said. Okay. Well, let's move into the questions that we got from the registration. So first of all, I want to say thank you to every one of you that submitted questions. So the first one, the first theme that I noticed with several questions is many people ask about disclosure and accommodations, which we kind of touched on earlier. So just want to revisit this, obviously the when and how, but what also practical steps can people take if they receive pushback or a denial of reasonable accommodations? Who would like to take that question?
Hmm.
I think I'm trying to, sorry. You said if someone receives pushback on accommodating you? Like,
Yep.
what was the question?
Yeah. So let's say that you're trying to advocate for an accommodation. What steps could you take if you receive pushback or a denial of those reasonable accommodations?
Mm.
So I would say start with asking, am I unmuted?
No, you're
No, we
good.
can hear you.
Okay. I was like, first, start with just asking why they're denying what they consider reasonable accommodations. Because sometimes it's a matter of them not understanding. During COVID, one of the big things I needed was the mask that had the clear window in it. And it became a big thing that went all the way to headquarters for us because they did not understand what I was asking for or what I or why the ask was there, right? That was the first thing. And then it was, oh, this is really expensive and it's only for one. And it's like, that's great, but we can buy them in a smaller batch. So I also provided a lot of information. And so I always go into it trying to be as resourceful as possible on there. And I've had pushback on accommodations to say, that's really expensive. Is there another route? And so usually I know multiple ways that we can do it. The accommodation is more or less, the other thing was I learned during that was that accommodations are for you and they affect you, but when they affect other people, they become unreasonable if they involve someone else. So the wearing of the mask involved someone else. And so literally if I offered the mask and they say no, there was nothing that I could do either. So it's about understanding like how the accommodation affects you and if the accommodation affects someone else. And if it affects someone else, what does that mean for that person? And then how do you do that? So having multiple ways to meet the accommodation you need when you're going is one way to kind of counter the pushback. And two, the other one is if you're prepared when they do push back to actually say, is there a reason what's the reason you're pushing back? Maybe we can solve that as well.
Yeah, well said. I think you hit the nail on its head. And yeah, I think it's important to tie it back to the benefit of the company, the benefit of you performing to the best of your ability based on the job description that has been set. So if you can tie that there. And the other resource that I want to highlight, and we have a webinar recording from last year that this task force did. A phenomenal resource is to check out the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN for short. We had a speaker, Teresa Goddard, who did a phenomenal job talking about how you can navigate those typical situations and requesting those accommodations you need. So definitely check that out. Yep.
One thing I wanted to circle back with is vocational rehabilitation in your city and state. Vocational
Certainly.
rehabilitation was huge for me when I first went back to school. And so they have a ton of resources, but they also have a list of other resources that you can use that can also be accommodations or can help you with that particular problem and finding out what are the best accommodations for your job and your environment.
Great, great point. Yes, I second that. Vocational rehab is a great resource. Thank you, Dr. Horton. Okay, so this next sort of theme of questions that we received, a lot of questions were focused on meetings, networking events, restaurants, hospitals, and all these other noisy environments. So what strategies, both from a kind of a behavioral standpoint and also a technological standpoint, have you found most effective to fully participate in those fast moving group conversations and high noise workplaces? Any takers for this question?
Well, I think, from my standpoint, um, there are certain situations with even behavior strategies and technology assist, it's just you're not going to be able to participate equally. So for me, I think just acknowledging that and recognizing those situations and not trying to beat my head against the wall has helped my peace of mind.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to Dr. Horton saying, just kind of giving yourself some grace in some of these
Yeah.
situations.
Yes.
And, I saw some questions even in the chat box, using things like a mini mic, like at a noisy dinner table, for example, or if you're at a party or even like that. Sometimes if you're at a table and there's a bunch of people around, sometimes placing it in the center can help. But if you're struggling to hear a particular person, having it oriented closer and even picking it up and speaking closer into it can really help alleviate the burden of trying to hear through all of the loud noises around you. So those are things. The other thing, and I definitely heard this from you guys on the panel, is orienting yourself, making sure they're facing you when they're talking. Or if I'm sitting down in a really noisy restaurant, I like to have people on this side because I hear better on this side. So making sure everyone that is going to be seated is to this side and not all on this side because my head is like a sound barrier. So, there's different little strategies like that that can go a long way. And I think Greg mentioned this earlier is use all of your tools, find what works for you. It's usually not always just one thing. It's usually a multiple variety of different things for different situations and different environments. So experiment, learn how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, try new things that maybe you hadn't thought to do before. Okay. Uh, Third question. This is about technology that actually works. And I saw this also come through the chat box and also from the registration questions. So, we obviously have been talking about things like the Manny microphone, table mics. There's even questions about the newer technologies like the captioning apps or even the glasses with AI and then captioning within the glasses or cast. So curious, have any of you guys used any of those types of technologies and what has worked or hasn't worked for you?
Well,
Please.
sorry, this is Greg, and I use caption apps on a tablet in large meetings. I found the one on my phone was not particularly good, but I used Otter, which I think Michael mentioned, and it provides really pretty good quality captions. So I've been found that's a big boon.
Awesome. Kendra and then Dr. Horton.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I've never used caption things, but my hearing aids, they go over my ear. They're not a cochlear implant. And I like recharge them almost like AirPods every single night. But the technology's gotten so much better. I would say like lean into your audiologist really heavily. Like I email my audiologist all the time because the technology's gotten so much better. So I have they hook up to Bluetooth with my phone, and so I have different settings. So it's actually made it easier. So I can wear them at work or loud environments a little more easily. I'm constantly adjusting them, but I have preset settings now for when I'm in different scenarios. Like I have a setting for restaurant, or I have a setting for concert, or I have a setting for, whatever. Talk to your audiologist because hearing aids are very custom nowadays, and you can program them so you can change it in real time, and that's been such a game changer.
Well said. Yeah, I think there's so much that can be done nowadays with programming. So really good call out. Dr. Horton.
Yeah, definitely programming the hearing aids, but the technology, I know Greg said he didn't have much luck with his phone, but literally I've been using the iPhone, one dictation on the iPhone. So I don't know if it's something new with the update, but it is remarkable. And so not only does it just like pick up in the room, if you're on a call, it also will pick up that. And so my hearing aids are connected directly. My hearing aids are connected directly to my laptop during Teams meetings. It's connected directly to my phone during everything else. I just did an upgrade on my laptop because it does connect to Apple versus it didn't connect to the HP, right? And so now it's connected directly. So when I'm in a Teams meeting, it's now not streaming, it's streaming directly to my hearing aids, which makes it
Oh,
just, it's crystal clear for me, makes it just that much better. I've tried the Ubi Duo it was my first time ever using that, but it's like two laptops but they're connected together up to 300 feet. The person can type on it. And so when I would go into situations and if someone was willing to type, they would just type on it the questions for me, and then I would just read them it's a bigger system, so it was a little bit harder. Now we just do it on text message, right? On that one, I do use what we call a Roger mic, and I also use a table mic. And that table mic is used in settings like when I'm in a conference room. And if it just turns out that it's not great acoustics or someone speaks really softly, we usually just set the mic on the table where they are and then use those. All of those technologies are used together. Sometimes it's just one, but most often it's multiple times. There's closed captioning on the phone, there's closed captioning on the computer to pick up the different environments just to make me successful.
excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Horton. Okay, I think we have time for one last sort of question bucket theme. And this is really all about kind of hearing protection and navigating that. So for those working in these loud industrial type settings, how do you balance hearing protection, but also making sure that you can hear, like with the ear sort of muffs, for example, that you have to wear? Any takers on that one? I feel like I heard someone mention having the hearing protection.
I mentioned about hearing protection, and actually we
Yeah,
take the mic out. So I take the Roger mic out with me and we just put the hearing protection over. But there are hearing protection where that will like literally has a speaker in it and a mic and then they can talk that way. I'm also working with the hearing aid company to get hearing protection that has embedded hearing aids on the inside because I'll be on the flight lines now as well. So there's multiple options to be able to do that.
great call out. Anybody else want to share their experience on that front?
Well, again, I think in these loud environments, there has to be a common recognition that essentially everybody is hearing impaired. Everybody's having communication issues, and the looping that Greg talked about and the visual signals, common visual signals that I talked about, have been highly effective.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I really am a huge, huge fan. I have a couple friends in my industry who use them now. There's products that came out, one that's called Loops, or Hears, or there's another one's called like Heargasm, but they're all basically the same thing. They're kind of like earplugs, but they're still open, so they basically just dampen the decibel of whatever's around, so you can still hear. I don't know if any of you have like seen advertisements for those, but that's wonderful. And I think what's really nice is like even if you don't wear both, like if you don't like things being that dampened, just having one, especially in my industry, when we're shaking with our tins, I can't tell you the number of people I know who eventually develop tinnitus because you have this like ting 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 of like ice in a metal like right next to your head for like 8, 12 hours straight. So that is huge in terms of protection and retaining your hearing loss if you're not already hearing impaired.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing here, Jim. Yeah, so to officially wrap this up, and before I turn it over to Melissa, I just want to say thank you all so much for, opening up and sharing and some of it, just being a little vulnerable. So, David, Greg, Kendra, and Dr. Horton, thank you all so much for spending some time with us to share your perspective. And I just want to reinforce really the take-home message is what we've heard today is thriving in these noisy environments is absolutely possible. What it requires and takes is the right mix of technology, communication, culture, and some courage. But don't forget to give yourself some grace too. I love that little soundbite. So I want to say thank you for joining us. And I'm going to do one shameless plug. If you are curious and want to get more hands-on technology tips and tricks, please join us. This task force will be hosting a in-person session at the HLAA 2026 convention in Louisville, Kentucky. And we will physically have all the different technologies to help you succeed. So if you're able to join us, please do so. Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, and I want to echo, please join us at the convention, but also want to thank all of our panelists. You guys, as always, are amazing. Michael, thank you for moderating. Lisa, thank you for the wonderful captions. And this was recorded. It will be on HLA's website in a few days. And please look forward to joining us at our next webinar in May. So, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.